The 19th century stands as a golden age of opera, a period when the art form flourished across the entirety of Europe, from Germany and France to Italy, Bohemia, and Russia. This widespread explosion of operatic creativity was driven in part because opera tied perfectly into two foundational themes of the Romantic era. The first was the intense romantic desire to break down the traditional barriers between the arts. For Romantic composers and their eager audiences, combining music with poetry, various forms of literature, and even deep philosophy made perfect sense. Just as the era produced the German Lieder, a miniature song form with a massive poetic dimension, it was also deeply committed to the grand union of music and theatrical drama. The second major theme of the era was the celebration of music as the most profound of all the arts. Opera composers and their librettists began to actively ponder the deeper meaning and message of their work, viewing opera not just as a vehicle for spectacular song and light entertainment, but as a type of serious drama conveyed through music. To achieve this gravitas, many operas sourced their plots from highly regarded romantic novels, such as Walter Scott's Ivanhoe and The Bride of Lammermoor, or from the poems and plays of literary giants like Lord Byron and Victor Hugo. Furthermore, as Romantic writers looked with renewed, intense enthusiasm at the works of William Shakespeare, opera composers followed suit, drawing widely from his tragedies and comedies to elevate their stages. Romantic opera made its serious start in the 1820s, heavily propelled by the major opera houses in Naples, Milan, and Paris. Gioacchino Rossini was the defining figure of this early generation, establishing the style and form of Italian Romantic opera before astonishingly retiring at the height of his fame in 1829. This Italian tradition is frequently called bel canto opera, a term that literally translates to beautiful song. The bel canto style glorified spectacular, pristine singing above all else, providing models of highly emotional melodic expression and heavily utilizing coloratura arias as showcases for the legendary virtuoso singers of the era. After Rossini's exit, Gaetano Donizetti dominated the scene, writing over 60 operas that pushed the genre decisively towards sentimental arias and blood and thunder action music. Vincenzo Bellini, considered the most refined of the early bel canto masters, wrote fewer operas but demanded highly expressive singing, dazzling vocal fireworks, and great acting, creating works with a unique romantic sheen. Meanwhile, a different aesthetic was taking hold to the north, where Carl Maria von Weber became the founder of German Romantic opera. His most important work, Der Freischütz, the Magic Bullet, broke away from the historical subjects favored by the Italians, instead possessing the eerie quality of a German folk tale with a strongly moral overtone. The plot involves a young huntsman who sells his soul to the devil for magic bullets, introducing supernatural subject matter to the serious operatic stage. To support this supernatural narrative, Weber placed a massive emphasis on the orchestra, writing sensational orchestral passages with spooky harmonic effects. This potent combination of folklore, supernatural themes, and a highly active, expressive orchestra became the defining characteristic of German Romantic opera, ultimately paving the way for the later massive works of Richard Wagner. Giuseppe Verdi emerged as the greatest of Italian opera composers, and the undisputed dominant figure in 19th century opera houses. Born to a storekeeper in a tiny village in northern Italy, Verdi's early life was marked by devastating tragedy when his young wife and 2 babies died within a 2-year period. Despite bearing these emotional scars for his entire life, he achieved a massive breakthrough at age 29 with his biblical opera Nabucco. Verdi was also an ardent supporter of the Risorgimento, the Italian liberation movement, and several of his early works featured strong patriotic themes. The composer's very name, Verdi, became a popular, secret patriotic acronym for Vittorio Emanuele, the popular choice for the King of Italy. After decades of furious composition and securing international fame, he was coaxed out of retirement in his 70s to write his final, greatest masterpieces, Otello and Falstaff, based on the plays of his idol, Shakespeare. The absolute heart of Verdi's enduring success lies in his unswerving commitment to the human voice. As a faithful follower of the bel canto principles laid down by Rossini, Donizetti and Bellini, Verdi firmly believed that opera was fundamentally a singing art. He never allowed the human voice to be overshadowed by the orchestra, and he possessed an unmatched genius for finding the exact vocal melody to perfectly capture a dramatic situation. However, Verdi was an innovator. He vastly expanded the role of the orchestra compared to his predecessors. He eliminated the old, dry recitatives accompanied only by simple harpsichord chords. Instead, plot, action, and dialogue were accompanied by the full orchestra, which played active, highly melodramatic music that urged the singers on and constantly hovered on the point of merging into full-fledged melody. Verdi's Rigoletto, which premiered in 1851, perfectly encapsulates his desire to set subjects that were novel, beautiful, and as bold as possible. For the source material, Verdi turned to a scandalous play by the French Romantic literary lion Victor Hugo, titled Le Roi s'amuse. The play had depicted a dissolute, womanizing king and an assassination plot, causing such outrage that the Paris police shut it down after a single performance. When Verdi attempted to adapt it for the Italian stage, censors demanded significant changes, forcing him to demote the villain from a king to a duke to make the immorality slightly less offensive to the authorities. The resulting plot features a web of extreme characters: the rapacious Duke of Mantua, Rigoletto, the hunchbacked jester divided between court cynicism and pure love for his daughter, Gilda, the innocent daughter who is seduced by the Duke, and Sparafucile, a menacing assassin. Act 3 of the opera features one of the most famous and enduring melodies in the history of music, the Duke's aria La donna è mobile, Woman is fickle. Waiting in Sparafucile's broken-down inn, the deeply immoral Duke holds forth on the unreliability of women, creating a masterful moment of dramatic irony. The aria captures the Duke's compelling, sweeping energy through the insistent repetition of a fiercely catchy short motive in sequence. Verdi structures the piece in a traditional strophic form, with the orchestra introducing each of the 2 stanzas before the vocal line culminates in a brilliant, high-pitched cadenza from the tenor. Showcasing his ability to blur formal lines, Verdi does not pause for applause after the aria. Instead, he keeps the orchestra moving, repeating the jaunty melody quietly and somewhat sinisterly in the woodwinds as a backdrop for a quick, dark, recitative exchange. Following the Duke's aria, Verdi constructs a musical and dramatic triumph with the quartet Bella figlia dell'amore, beautiful child of love. The staging utilizes a brilliant split-scene effect. Inside the sordid inn are the Duke and Maddalena, while outside, in the dark, eavesdropping through a crack in the wall, are Rigoletto and his heartbroken daughter, Gilda. The scene begins with a fast section featuring recitative-like exchanges set over a lively, continuous orchestral melody. The Duke presses his seductive attentions onto Maddalena, who jokingly resists, while Gilda reacts in horror outside. This continuous orchestral propulsion is a prime example of how Verdi blurred the strict boundaries between recitative and full-fledged melody to keep the dramatic action constantly moving forward. The music eventually comes to an expectant pause, launching into the magnificent, slower andante section of the quartet. The Duke initiates the movement with a suave, rising 16-measure melody that climbs to a passionate climax as he attempts to seduce Maddalena. As his melody concludes, the other three characters join in, and Verdi masterfully assigns each of them a distinct melodic profile that perfectly matches their emotional state. Maddalena responds with short, quick bursts of laughing vocal lines. Gilda sings despairing, broken, descending lines as she sobs, and Rigoletto plots his revenge with stern, slow, steady declamations. Verdi's genius is fully realized as he manages to weave these completely independent emotional and psychological stances into a rich, harmonized counterpoint, driving the tragedy toward its ultimate, fatal thunderstorm conclusion. After Beethoven, the most influential composer of the 19th century was Richard Wagner, a man whose innovations revolutionized instrumental music just as much as opera. Wagner's life was as dramatic and controversial as his art. He was exiled from Germany for 13 years due to his involvement in the 1848 revolutions, and he authored vicious anti-Semitic essays that would tragically be co-opted by the Nazis decades later. Despite his abrasive and megalomaniacal personality, his hypnotic charisma allowed him to secure the fanatic patronage of King Ludwig II of Bavaria. This royal backing ultimately allowed Wagner to achieve something no composer had done before. He promoted and oversaw the construction of a custom opera house in Bayreuth, Germany, designed solely for the performance of his own massive works. Wagner completely condemned the Italian bel canto tradition, complaining that traditional opera had degenerated into a mere concert in costume. He felt that the standard division between arias and recitatives was hopelessly artificial, as it required the dramatic action to stop completely just to allow for stretches of pretty singing. To replace this, Wagner developed a revolutionary concept he called the Gesamtkunstwerk, or total work of art. In this new form, which he insisted on calling music drama rather than opera, all elements of the production were seamlessly united. music shared equal honors with poetry, drama, philosophy, stage design, and acting. Unlike previous composers, who relied on separate librettists, Wagner furnished all the high-flown poetry and complex philosophical themes for these works entirely by himself. To execute his vision of the Gesamtkunstwerk, Wagner drastically altered the mechanics of operatic composition, shifting the primary focus away from the vocalists and onto the orchestra. In a Wagnerian music drama, the singers generally do not sing traditional lyrical arias or display the tunefulness found in Verdi's works. Instead, they deliver a free-formed declamation of the text, a sort of heightened, continuous recitative that rarely gives way to full-fledged song. Consequently, the orchestra steps up to become the true narrator of the story. Rather than alternating between set musical numbers, Wagner's music dramas consist of a single, complex, hypnotic orchestral web that plays continuously, unifying the massive scale of the drama without relying on traditional forms. The crucial structural and storytelling device within this continuous orchestral web is the leitmotif, or guiding motive. A leitmotif is a specific musical theme intimately associated with a person, object, idea, or even a symbolic emotion within the drama. Crucially, Wagner's leitmotifs are not simply static sound effects that play like a tape recording. They are subject to constant thematic transformation. As the dramatic action unfolds, these motifs shift in rhythm, harmony, or instrumentation to reflect a character's changing psychological state. By weaving and transforming these leitmotifs, the orchestra can convey deep psychological complexity, secretly suggesting to the audience what a character is truly thinking or feeling, even when the singer is silent or speaking of something else entirely. Wagner's first completed music drama, Tristan and Isolde, took a medieval legend and transformed it into a profound, mystical exploration of Romantic philosophy. In writing the libretto, Wagner was heavily influenced by his contemporary, the philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer. Schopenhauer posited that all human experience consists of two realms: the will, which represents raw, unencumbered emotions and sexual drives, and appearance, which encompasses ideas, morals, reason, and the rules of society. Schopenhauer insisted that the will always dominates appearance, and that music is the only unencumbered expression of the will. Wagner designed Tristan and Isolde to be the ultimate musical embodiment of this philosophy, presenting sexual love as a cosmic, overwhelming force that easily shatters all worldly rules and moral obligations. The plot of the opera meticulously traces this philosophical transcendence over the course of 3 acts. In Act 1, love overpowers Isolde's fierce pride and her blood enmity toward Tristan. In Act 2, during the longest unconsummated love scene in operatic history, love overcomes Tristan's sworn chivalry and loyalty to his uncle, King Mark. The climax occurs in Act 3, where passion becomes the ultimate experience, transcending earthly reality and the boundaries of life itself. When Tristan finally dies in Isolde's arms, she sinks down in rapture and expires alongside him. For both characters, death is not a tragic defeat, but rather an ecstatic expression of love, moving them into a realm where the conventional rules of society and the barrier between life and death have completely lost their power. Wagner's pursuit of the grandiose reached its absolute zenith with Der Ring des Nibelungen, the Nibelungsring, a staggering 4-opera cycle that takes a quarter of a century to complete and spans over 15 hours across 4 separate nights. The cycle, consisting of the Rheingold, the Valkyrie, Siegfried, and Twilight of the Gods, operates on a massive mythological scale. Wagner utilized famous Germanic and Norse legends, filling his stage with gods, goddesses, giants, dwarves, dragons, and magical invisibility cloaks. However, Wagner employed this elaborate mythology to tell a highly contemporary allegorical tale. The entire mythos serves as a severe critique of the moral decline of 19th century bourgeois society, acting as an indictment against the modern world's destructive greed for money and relentless hunger for power. The central conflict of the sprawling narrative hinges on the incompatibility of destructive greed and human compassion. The inciting incident involves a precious lump of gold stolen from the Rhine River, which is forged into a magical ring that brings misery and corruption to all who possess it. The crucial catch is that to wield the ring's power, one must explicitly renounce love. Over the course of the 4 nights, audiences watch as gods, humans, and beasts are brought to grief by their lust for the gold. Even Wotan, the leader of the gods, is hopelessly corrupted by this pursuit. This foundational corruption eventually requires the innocent hero, Siegfried, to attempt a salvation of the world order, illustrating Wagner's belief that society was destroying itself through its abandonment of deep emotion in favor of material gain. Act 1, Scene 1 of the Valkyrie provides a masterful demonstration of Wagner's orchestral narrative techniques and psychological depth. The scene introduces a complex subplot concerning Siegmund and Sieglinde, 2 of Wotan's children who were separated in childhood. Upon their chance reunion, they experience an irresistible attraction that results in a doubly illicit and incestuous union, as Sieglinde is already married to the violent Hunding. The scene opens with a raging orchestral thunderstorm. As an exhausted Siegmund stumbles into the dwelling and collapses on the hearth, the orchestra plays a descending scale, the storm motive, which tells the audience that the violent weather outside perfectly mirrors the internal turmoil within Siegmund's soul. As the scene progresses, the orchestra continuously guides the emotional narrative beneath the minimal stage action. When Sieglinde brings Siegmund his first drink of water, a solo cello introduces the warmly harmonized love motive, depicting their immediate, profound connection. When she fetches him a second drink of mead, the orchestra swells to a massive climax, which is suddenly undercut by a loud, dissonant chord on the word Misswende, ill fate, signaling Siegmund's realization that he brings bad luck wherever he goes. As they stare deeply at each other, the orchestra introduces a hesitant, warm, sorrow/empathy motive that builds in intensity, cementing their mutual understanding. However, this beautiful, wordless communion is abruptly cut off by an ominous leitmotif in the low brass, instantly alerting the audience that the violent husband Hunding has returned. In the generations immediately following Wagner and Verdi, the landscape of opera shifted dramatically once more. The profound musical innovations of the mid-century masters left an indelible mark. Emotional passages increasingly broke down into free, fragmentary melodic forms, and the distinction between aria and recitative became even harder to maintain. Wagner's continuous musical webs and his sophisticated leitmotif techniques became the standard aesthetic influence for the next generation of composers, establishing a trend of continuous orchestral scoring. However, while composers adopted Wagner's musical architecture, they largely rejected his subject matter. The era moved sharply away from mythical settings, high-flown philosophy, and tales of ancient kings, queens, and gods. Instead, composers and audiences gravitated toward realistic depictions of the modern world, giving rise to a powerful movement known as verismo, or truthism. Verismo opera abandoned the aristocracy in favor of modern-day subjects and middle or lower-class characters, presenting them with gritty, unvarnished realism. These operas frequently dealt with scandalous liaisons and intense, wrenching acts of violence that the strict censors of the early 19th century would never have permitted on stage. The undisputed leader of the Italian verismo movement was Giacomo Puccini, who became the most popular opera composer around the turn of the century. Puccini mastered this style by combining intense, short vocal melodies with a brilliant cinematic sense for managing dramatic stage action in perennial favorites like Tosca, La Bohème, and Madame Butterfly. An earlier, vital precursor to the verismo movement was created by the French composer Georges Bizet with his 1875 masterpiece, Carmen. The opera's stark realism, lower-class characters, and overt sensuality were initially deemed entirely scandalous by polite society, resulting in a very cool reception at its premiere. Tragically, Bizet died at the age of 36 during the opera's initial run, believing that his greatest work was a catastrophic failure. However, Carmen quickly regained the stage and exploded in popularity, becoming one of the most enduring, frequently performed operas in the international repertory. The opera is also a prime example of exoticism, a romantic trend where composers sought to evoke the mystery, differing ethnicities, and uncontrolled sensuality of foreign lands, in this case presenting a fiery vision of Spain through French eyes. The narrative of Carmen centers on a volatile, highly destructive love triangle. The title character is a fiercely independent, sexually irresistible Roma woman who works in a cigarette factory. She completely ensnares Don José, a virtuous soldier who falls so deeply under her spell that he ruins his life, deserts his military regiment, and is driven mad with jealousy. Carmen eventually loses interest in him, turning her affections toward Escamillo, a glamorous, devil-may-care toreador. The opera ends with a brutal, intensely realistic climax that stands in stark contrast to the poetic deaths of earlier romantic heroines. Driven completely mad by jealousy and rejection, Don José violently stabs Carmen to death outside the bullring, while the crowd inside unknowingly cheers for Escamillo's triumph. The audience is introduced to Carmen and her worldview in Act 1 through her famous entrance aria, the habanera. The title itself refers to a popular Cuban dance style, and Bizet's decision to imitate a genre of popular song for the grand entrance of a leading operatic character was an act of radical musical realism in its own right. The aria clearly spells out her personal philosophy. Love is a rebellious, wild bird that absolutely no one can tame. Bizet structures the aria as a strophic song with a refrain, but he creates dynamic dramatic tension by having Carmen interact directly with the chorus. He brilliantly shifts the harmonic mode to match the interaction, utilizing a dark minor mode during Carmen's solo verses and bursting into a bright major mode when the chorus joins her for the refrain. The famously seductive quality of the habanera relies heavily on two specific musical elements. First, the vocal melody is a slinky, descending chromatic line that perfectly evokes the unpredictable, evasive nature of the wild bird she is singing about. Second, the rhythm is anchored by an infectious, distinctive bass line pattern that repeats continually in the lowest strings, driving the dance forward. At the conclusion of the aria, a crucial dramatic confrontation occurs. Carmen approaches Don José and provocatively throws a bunch of flowers at his feet. At this exact fateful moment, the orchestra introduces the curse theme, an ominous, dissonant leitmotif played in the cellos. This dark musical shift instantly breaks the seductive mood, signaling to the audience that this encounter will ultimately lead to a fatal tragedy. While serious opera pursued grandiose tragedy and gritty realism, a parallel tradition of lighter musical theatre evolved alongside it, beginning with the European operetta. The term literally translates to little opera, and these works differed from mainstream opera by utilizing spoken dialogue between musical numbers rather than continuous orchestral recitative. By the late 19th century, operettas offered highly comical plots, typically set in imagined kingdoms, where fun-loving aristocrats rubbed shoulders with contented peasants. The genre produced exceptional composers like Johann Strauss Jr., known as the Waltz King, and the witty British duo of W.S. Gilbert and Arthur Sullivan. This European style was soon imported to the United States, where Victor Herbert became a leading figure, introducing the style to American audiences with hits like Babes in Toyland. By the 1920s, American composers began to radically transform this European import by infusing it with the uniquely American style of African American jazz. This infusion created a distinct new art form for the Broadway stage, known as the musical comedy, or simply the musical. Early Broadway tunesmiths like Jerome Kern and George Gershwin revolutionized the genre by bringing up-to-date American storylines to the theater. Kern's Showboat in 1927 was highly innovative, featuring a mixed-race cast and directly tackling issues of racism, albeit from a white perspective. Gershwin pushed the boundaries even further in 1935 with Porgy and Bess, a work that blended jazz and classical elements so thoroughly that it pushed the border between musical and opera, securing a permanent place in the international operatic repertory. Building on the foundations of Kern and Gershwin, the 1940s and 1950s ushered in what many consider the golden age of the musical. This era was utterly dominated by composer Richard Rodgers and lyricist Oscar Hammerstein, who created massive, long-running hits like Oklahoma and The Sound of Music. They elevated the art form by ensuring that plots were worked out with sophisticated care, with musical numbers growing logically out of the story to present a sentimental, innocent vision of the world. However, other musicals soon began tackling more challenging subjects, most notably with West Side Story in 1957. Featuring music by classical composer Leonard Bernstein and lyrics by Stephen Sondheim, it transferred Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet to gang-ridden Manhattan, utilizing ethnic tension and incredible choreography by Jerome Robbins to bring unprecedented conflict and maturity to the genre. The evolution of the musical has continued unabated into the modern era, constantly incorporating new stylistic influences. In the late 20th century, Stephen Sondheim wrote intellectually rigorous, dark masterpieces like Sweeney Todd and Into the Woods, while British composer Andrew Lloyd Webber introduced massive rock-influenced blockbusters like The Phantom of the Opera. Today, the continuous lineage of music drama remains incredibly vital, perhaps best exemplified by Lin-Manuel Miranda's 2015 mega-hit, Hamilton. By utilizing Billboard-topping hip-hop and casting actors of color to play mostly white historical figures, Hamilton revolutionized the way historical narratives are presented on stage. This continuous adaptation proves that the musical is still remaking itself for new eras and audiences, just as opera has done throughout its long, magnificent history.